I wish I had that kind of opening with every single Zoom call I did. That was amazing. Did we send that to you, or was that your baby?
No, that was my baby. I just love bragging about our
Incredible.
peeps.
Oh, well, you guys are amazing. So thank you very much for the world class intro there. Before we kick things off, I've got a couple tabs open on here, and I've got some people on right now that maybe don't have an existing email list for their business or their brand. And I want to give a little bit of a discussion as to why that's important to have, especially, we sort of live in the social media era. So a lot of businesses, they lean heavily on either digital ads or doing social media stuff. And I want to talk about a few things with that. I mean, I know everybody's paying attention to the news right now, and you probably heard about the Twitter files. Anybody that's not following this, it's wild what's going on there. Lots of scandalous stuff happening with our social media, and of course, Facebook at Meta, which we work with closely in our ads business. They're not having such a good month either. Dismal earnings, lots of broken applications between Facebook and Instagram. On a personal level, it's made my life a nightmare to connect those two accounts. Multiple issues, outdated support docs, all of that hurting their earnings. And then, of course, there's TikTok. You could always rely on those guys. But the FBI says that TikTok could be used to spy on Americans and that the Chinese government is involved. So my question to you as a business owner is, why would you rely on these things to grow your business? And more importantly, if you're relying on those things, why would you not diversify into something like email, which has always been a way for you to communicate directly with your audience? And so that's what we're going to talk about today. And before we get started, I would like to point out a couple things. If you don't have an existing list to market to or to email to in mass, you could probably build one very quickly by simply announcing it on your social media or texting your contacts. So that's all it takes to really get started with something like this. And we've started with lists as small as like 30, 40 people. So keeping that in mind, I'm going to show you how, if you had an existing list, how to maximize the growth on that. And we'll talk at the end about some of the tools that we use to manage that, because I don't want to get in a this versus that discussion of, hey, which is the best mass email service provider. We're not here to do that. We're just here to talk about what makes it effective, and afterwards we'll open this up to Q&A where we can jump into those sort of discussions. So without further ado, I'll give you guys the overview of our presentation today. We're going to cover four things primarily. These are the four components to all good email marketing. And we'll jump in and out between these ideas, but you can track everything that I'm doing in the top left corner of the screen. So to kick things off, let's talk about the elephant in the room. Let's talk about copy. My philosophy, and this is a controversial one, is that in email marketing, it is always better to say less and to say more by saying less. So to elaborate on that, have you ever received an email and you click to open it and then you see just words on the page and you're like, nah, next? Me personally, I kind of dread my Monday morning routine, because the first thing that I do is I go through and I read like 300 emails, and half of them are just words after words after words that could be shortened into a few simple sentences. We like to follow the Hemingway method at W Strategies. So you want to make your writing concise. So this sentence here, for instance, same thing. Eliminate unnecessary words. We refer to Hemingway for this. Hemingway does, for some of the college students here or college graduates, maybe even some of the writers, Hemingway does 6-word story. And something that always has me gutted is his first presentation of this. For sale, baby shoes, never worn. Tells a pretty complete story in just 6 words. And every time I read that, I think about that, the narrative of that. It lets my imagination go to work. I've got a funnier example of this that you guys might appreciate. I look like dad's college roommate. And we can sort of surmise what's going on with that one. So we'll skip that and cut to the chase here. So when you're doing your writing, you want to look for ways that you can say the same thing with maybe 2 or 3 words instead of a full sentence. A trick that we use with W Strategies is we'll run all of our copy through Hemingway app. This is actually a free app. So you can go to hemingwayapp.com, copy paste your copy into there before shipping it out. It's actually going to look for grammatical errors as well. And it'll help you make your sentences more concise. Another key feature of this app is it'll show you the reading level of your writing. So that can really be helpful when you're thinking about your specific audience. If you're speaking to a college, a group of college professors, maybe you bring that writing level a little higher, and that's okay. Or if you're speaking to guys like me, just your average Joes, maybe bring it down a notch so that us simple folks can understand. So that being said, run your copy through Hemingway and make sure that you use positive language. Nobody likes reading negative emails, even though there is something to be said about taking your emails and evoking some emotion. I think everybody can agree we get plenty of negativity from the news and from social media and from all of these different cycles that we expose our brain through. One thing that you can do to increase the amount of engagement that you get on your emails is just to switch that language up a little bit and make it a little bit more positive. Something that you'll experience is talking like a winner. This is a good example of this is in the political circuits. We see people that communicate as if their objective is already completed or their objective is easily within reach. And a good example for this with business would be if I was a outfitting store, to speak to you as if I've already sold you the product, or I've already put whatever I'm putting into your hands, it's already there and physically materialized. You do this by creating a positive atmosphere within your email. And one of the tools that I like to use, because that's very vague in general, is Grammarly. Grammarly in specific offers a way to change your writing through artificial intelligence using insights. I'll show you guys what that looks like. So you download and install this app. It's browser specific. So if you have Google Chrome, you can download the attachment for Google Chrome. If you're using Microsoft Edge, so on and so forth, whatever browser you're using. Personally, I use this with Google Chrome. It's free. You install it. It runs through all of your writing, and it'll give you a little insight in the bottom right corner, and it'll say, here's your tone insights. So I like to reference this in all of my writing to sort of change the specific tone that I'm using, because sometimes you get in the mode of just writing, and you're like, I wonder how I sound to my audience. And if you're anything like me, you might not have, you might have yourself boxed in when you're writing a lot. You might be stuck in a narrow field with that. You might need some outside influence or some input to sort of steer that. This tool is amazing for that. So check it out. It's free to use, and I don't work for them, I promise, although they should pay me for being a spokesperson. All right, cool. So moving on. Always evoke emotion. There's multiple ways you can do this. Given the previous slide, I like to lean more on the positive or the emotional highs, but you want your readers to feel something when they're reading. To give you an example of this, I'll show you guys an email that we actually sent out. Now, I want to do a little bit of storytelling here. So imagine, if you will, and this might be hard for my Florida or Texas audience, but imagine that there's snow on the ground. You wake up, there's 3 foot of snow out there, and you can't even get to your car. It's so thick. You got to shovel your way out. And you've got an email and a couple missed calls from work. And the email subject line reads, "Snow day." This is exactly what went out one wintry day from W Strategies to a little chunk of our audience. And what it was an interactive handbook or support guide that was sent to one of our major CRM deployments. And you can see from the email engagement that this really did well. I mean, we're talking 58% open rate. That's incredible. And I know, smaller audience, tight-knit groups, but analyzing this, we could talk about specifically why this did so well. So there's a few things. One, we've got this beautiful emoji and this perfect subject line. Waking up and seeing that in your email, if you worked for this organization, you might think, yay, I'm getting the day off. I can shovel my driveway and drink hot cocoa. I don't have to go out and freeze my butt off and go to the office today. It's great. So I think that plays a crucial role as to why this did so well. Another thing is we're providing some sort of value to our readers with a link and a handbook. So as you read further, there's sort of a joke listed in here. Are you snowed in looking for some reading material? Well, pour yourself a glass of hot cocoa or maybe even a hot toddy. Kudos to Jonathan for this copywriting here because it's pretty genius. I had a laugh when I read it. Have a look below. And I'm not just saying that because he's my boss. I'm saying that because this is genuinely good copywriting and the numbers don't lie. So that being said, you always want to provoke some sort of emotional response. In this case, I think there's multiple emotional responses provoked with the email. We provoke an idea that maybe you have the day off with the title and the subject, "Snow Day." We also provoke a little bit of humor. And so it works really, really well in that regard. And we'll talk a little bit more in depth about subject lines because we're going to get into how you can build really, really good subject lines here. I want to show you some more examples of different subject lines that we've used in our email campaigns throughout the years, and we can sort of analyze why they do well. One thing that we do religiously at W Strategies is we A/B test everything that goes out. And this should be a rule of thumb for anybody that's doing any sort of mass emails. If your email is going to multiple recipients and it's from an organization, maybe a nonprofit, a government organization, or even a business, you want to try different subject lines. And the value of this is that you never know how that's going to impact your readership. So here's a subject line and an example of something that would evoke an emotional response to have your readers open this. Now, this was actually sent from my email, subject full disclosure, with an open rate of 40%. That's pretty good. That's not a bad open rate. It gets a check mark. It did all right. I'd like to also show you another one that we did as an example of something a little more boring. Testing out the emojis theory that I have, which is that emojis do help your subject line. I haven't quite proved that yet, but we're going to get to the bottom of this eventually. This one is a little bit more boring. And I think the use of the word guidelines hurt our open rate in this case, because comparing and contrasting that with our former email, our open rate has slumped by about 7%. Yikes. All right, that one does not pass. So it's important to always diversify this and test these things. Now, if you're not using a tool to measure these metrics, We can talk about that at the end of the presentation. We are gonna open up some Q&A to specifically go over that, because I think that's critical to email success. But in this case, we've got good examples here of what does and does not work. So always provide value. We have give it to me, same message, give the people what they want. And how do we know which one's going to work better? Well, we split our list in half and we send it to both, and we test and we see which one does better. Actually, truly, you want to do that in increments. So if you have a list of 100, you're going to send to 10 here and 10 here and measure between the two, and then pick your winner that way. That being said, always provide something for your readers, whether it be like a free offering, advice, a bit of humor. Every email has to include something that would entice you to open an email. Sometimes you just need to critically provide information. We do PSAs all the time. Ironically, those are some of our highest open rates. Don't ask me why. They just do really well. And it comes down to this concept. Here's an example of one of our emails that did terribly. And analyzing this, you can see that from this email, I'm actually not really providing much value at all. I'm actually asking for something from my email readers. Unless you've got a really dedicated, loyal, tight-knit, like brand bought-in following, this kind of email is going to slump in your open rates every single time. And the reason is, well, there's multiple reasons for this one, but we'll jump into that. It doesn't really speak to the reader in any personal way. I'm directly asking for something without offering anything in return. So basically, I'm asking for people's time. And there's nothing compelling about this. If you open this email, I imagine you'd be as pissed off as the couple hundred people that it went out to. In this case, the 30 total opens. It didn't do too well. Compare and contrast that to our snow days email, which did quite well. So that being said, here's an example of a good one. Notice the open rate. We went from 28% to 40% here. Why is that? Well, for starters, right in the first sentence of the email, I'm asking a compelling question through a hook that provides value. Everybody is looking for productivity hacks and apps to automate things. What's wrong with that? It speaks to a more general audience, and it speaks to something that people want. Do you need to be more productive? Should we even have this conversation before caffeine? Go ahead, I'll wait. Productivity is doing less, not more. And then here's the add value. I can show you how you can be more productive by doing less. High open rate, high engagement provides value. Another key difference between these two emails, you'll notice, is the personalization. And that is very important with every email campaign that you put out. You want to make sure that as much as possible, you can personalize, even if you're doing it in mass. Check out this email that went out from Airbnb. This is a classic example of personalization. Not only are they speaking to their audience with the direct first name, but they're also speaking to the location of the individual. Now we compare this to my poor performer, and we can see right away that aside from the glaring sort of missing add value of this email, that we're also missing a first name here. I'm not addressing my audience in a personal way. I'm not speaking to them to provide any sort of value or meaningful engagement. I'm simply just saying, hey, random person via email, you might not know who I am, but I need some information from you. And that's going to lose every time, unfortunately. I'm surprised they even got a 28% open rate with that. All right. The fact of the matter is people do business with people, and that's why it's always important to personalize your emails. For instance, some folks might like doing business with Ben more than W Strategies. W Strategies is just a logo. What the heck is W Strategies? Nobody knows. But me, you might like jumping on an email thread, or you might be like Christy, and who I haven't spoke with in several years, but used to work with, and is like, oh my gosh, Ben's doing an email seminar. Let me jump on that. And so that's a good example of that. Or you might be like Johnny, and you might prefer to work with him. He's a little bit, more disciplined and laid back. He's got twin toddlers that constantly put him through the ringer and make him a little more resilient in these sort of speaking situations. Or you might like, if Sean Miller's in the room, you might like having a beer with Ben better because you don't have screaming toddlers in the background in that case. So that being said, you want to let your audience guide your conversations. And one of the ways that we do this in email marketing is by surveying. Here's an example of some open rates pulled from a campaign that we did for a political organization who will not be named. This is top secret stuff, guys, so bear with me here. We've redacted names and campaign stuff for obvious confidentiality reasons, but check this out. Here's the open rate before gathering feedback and targeting a specific audience. Watch how this grows over the course of a month. Boom, over 50% on that open rate. Here is an example of the email that triggered this entire growth. Now this is ugly because I pulled it directly from the CRM, and it's obviously a little redacted. As you can see, this email in question, we're reaching out before a primary, and we're just hitting people up for their feedback. I mean, who in the room here doesn't love telling people your political beliefs? I know in Texas, they don't even let you if you're in a bar, a church, or a family gathering. It's just not allowed. It's bad form. But in this case, we're asking for it. So we've included a couple things here. For starters, there's a banner at the top that I've omitted for multiple reasons, just to protect the confidentiality of a client. That's a clickable banner, so we can measure the interaction with that. We also have included a survey here and a button in this email that normally would show up if this wasn't just copy pasted from the CRM. So we're asking the viewership, hey, can you tell us a little bit more about what you would like to see from this office over the next few years? And to share your thoughts, please visit this website. Now, the website link takes you directly to a survey, but before that, it's showing the key issues that this particular candidate hits on. So that's powerful and meaningful because it invites your viewership to have a conversation with you, which is a little bit unique to these sort of situations, because most of the time mass emails, they really strive to have what we call evergreen content. And the reason that people want to use evergreen content in their email writing is because they can take little chunks of that and reuse it over and over again. It makes the copywriting easier. I would argue that while that's valuable and important to have sort of a database of that type of content built up, it is much more valuable to lean heavily on the feedback that your actual audience will give you, and then segment and build from that. That being said, my list is not working. Segment your lists. A tool that we like to use for this is HubSpot. That's how I sent out a lot of the email invites for this event. You can actually start with Google Sheets or whatever tool you're using, MailChimp. Start with a broad list and start identifying key topics. For instance, if you are an insurance agent, you might want to sectionalize by the type of clientele that you have. The way that this would work for mass email engagement is taking the list of home insurance clients that you have versus auto insurance clients that you have versus people with kids in college versus, all these specific criteria that you can build out from that and segment and make those tags. You separate those customers by different lists and start engaging with them based on these interests. Now, I want to stress the importance with list segmentation of always cleaning your data. But before we get into that, I'm going to show you a couple examples of personas that we've used to help us segment our lists at W Strategies. This is an email that goes out from info@W Strategies with general information to our state and local government clientele. And all this is to identify if there is an interest in maybe some of these Atlas services that we provide, which is business in a box web development, or Google Workspace, which is Google Drive, Google Meeting Space, Google Docs, Gmail, the entire workspace suite. So we send this out, and based on the engagement that we get from this, we know with the next email from Ben or Jonathan, what specifically is an area of interest to these particular folks. Another good example of a way that we segment our list without even thinking about it, for those of you that have a financial department head or an operations head within your organization, any sort of invoicing or billing related questions, those can easily come from the specific department head. In this case, we're sending an invoice. Somebody's got to pay their bill here, and Natasha, being head of operations within the organization and the head of invoicing and accounts, she is going to send that email. People know that when they see Natasha, that they're either paying some money or getting paid some money. So it's a good way to help you segment your lists here, just thinking sort of outside the box. Now, moving on to the original thought that I had there about cleaning data. It is important when you're doing all this list segmentation that you understand who is actually engaging with you and who is not. So you want to make sure that as you're segmenting these lists, that the data matches the audience. A good way to think about this is any sort of magazine or print publication that puts out specific topics, whether they be reading or music or arts and entertainment, or maybe even entrepreneurship. You have all these different broad range of topics that are spoken about in a digital publication. You want to match that to your reader. You sort this by audience. It should be pretty easy to do with the CRM. And then you start moving it around based on who's actually engaging with it. When you notice the open rate dropping, you'll move people. All right, these guys that were in my magazine category have been shifted over to a book email list, and the engagement has dropped with these folks here. So I'm going to move them back over to magazine. I'm going to stop sending them articles about books. And W Strategies, what that looks like for us is these folks that like to attend our webinars and are engaged with it are going to stay on this email list. And then these folks that didn't really engage well with that, but engaged with our support doc emails or our PSA, our new product offerings, they'll stay in this category over here. You want to always refine and segment that. So coming back down to cleaning data. That's how you refine and segment. You want to do this as often as possible and keep a few things in mind. You do not build content for people that are not interested. Don't do it. It's a waste of your time. The reason being, if they didn't engage with you on any of your current offerings initially, why would you jump through hoops to try and get them to engage with something that you're not really involved with to begin with? You can re-engage your no-shows, but do this in the form of a survey or a question. You want to keep this as simple as possible, because if they're not really engaging with you to begin with, they're probably going to balk at that email coming in. But you can ask them something to incite an answer. I mean, this is the classic Dear John email that goes out if you're in sales. It's the, hey, I haven't heard from you in a while, so we're going to have to break up and I'm not going to sell you anything. And I really just wanted to get to know you better sort of email. The best way to do these is to have a subject line that forces sort of or invokes a response. What I like to do is I like to put attention assistance needed in the subject line, and then attach the name. And that's been effective for getting that open rate up. But if your content doesn't engage well after trying to re-engage, it's time to cut your losses and segment out the low interest folks. Either they like what you're selling or they don't. Either they like what you're saying or they don't. Either they see the value in it or it's not for them. So move them, segment them out, move on. A lot of people haven't figured out the unsubscribe button. All right. Test and test some more. After you cleaned and segmented your list, this is coming back to the original idea that we have with subject lines. You want to trial different ideas and different concepts. Here's 2 examples from The Hustle. If you don't subscribe to The Hustle already, check it out. It's a great free newsletter, and it talks about different major industry changes in business, and a lot of that is relative to general marketing. Here's The Hustle with same thing with 2 different subject lines. Big problem, small solution, a mini fridge-sized satellite. See, I would open that one. I would also probably have a higher open rate with this one below, though. The Hustle, cat videos for all mankind. And I mean, both are good. Both are good. Both are going to incite a little bit of an open there, but 2 very different audiences. For me, being a cat lover myself and constantly putting out food to attract the strays, just so I can get a decent Christmas card this year, I'm going to identify better with B. That's my crazy. So that being said, this kind of comes down to 2 schools of thought as well. There's always been in email marketing, in social media, in video marketing, in almost all marketing segments, there's been 2 different theories of how to do this. And the first is to keep your content as short as possible and deliver as much meaningful information. That's the school of thought that we lean heavily on at W Strategies. The second is to have the most amount of content going out to constantly be in your viewer's face. And the logic there is, if you're buried in between 300 other emails, what is really going to stand out about your email? I would argue to figure out which is better, you need to prescribe to both. And you need to have your long form and your short form content. One way that you can mix this up a little bit is by providing more value with your long form content by engaging with video. You can easily create a video, upload it to YouTube, upload it to Dub, both are free, attach it to an email and send it out for your long form. And then give your preface of what you're covering, and below that attach your script. That's one way to deliver a long form content without necessarily overwhelming your viewers and making it digestible to the reader. I would do both long form and short form when you do this though. And the way that you get to the short form is to segment the same concepts and give it in bite-sized pieces. You can do this over the course of a couple of weeks. You can do this over the course of a month. and it'll make your content writing a little bit easier, but you always want to track those ideas somehow, whether that be a spreadsheet, a CRM, however you're measuring what you've already put out. You got to keep track of that stuff. So one of the ways we do that with W Strategies, we use the CRM. From this CRM, I was actually able to identify what was being opened and clicked on in my email. This in particular is an example of the analytics capability of HubSpot. Full disclosure, we use HubSpot, but we're not paid to advertise for them. So I'm not going to talk too nicely about them. I am going to say there's other options. There's MailChimp, there's Aweber, there's all kinds of services you can use for email marketing. And a lot of that, a lot of the specific pros and cons are going to weigh into how you might use it within your organization. Some are better for different types of businesses. With us, we're using HubSpot because it's simple and it integrates well with the forms that we use to capture data. It integrates well with our social media. It integrates and plays well with our website. That being said, I was sending out emails en masse with this W Strategies logo at the top of them without ever realizing that that would invoke people's to click on that particular logo. So until I had the analytics on these emails, it had never occurred to me once to even include a link on that image. But after sending out the first email, I had seen this little number over the logo, and this was something people clicked almost immediately. They open the email and they say, huh, look at that logo, let me click that. And upon seeing the analytics on that, I knew, all right, I'm going to put something in that logo now, a link or something. So when people click it, it'll take them somewhere. Otherwise, it's just wasted screen space. That being said, there's also a factor of anything that could be clicked in your email is going to be clicked. So in this case, this is the email that I sent out to our existing database of viewers to try and get them to attend my email marketing seminar. You can see from this email that we had a fair amount of people click the Join Me button. We also had a bunch of people click Darth Vader, which is, you know, I'm not going to lie, I would click Darth Vader too. And you have to put some sort of link there. So in this case, I linked it right to the seminar. I wouldn't know to do these things without the analytics. Another important feature of the analytics is it's going to tell you what type of audience you're engaging with. A lot of my state and local government folks, they're going to be sitting in front of a computer when they check their email. They're not going to want to have hundreds of emails coming to their phone, and rightfully so, especially if you're dealing with high volume of emails. You don't want to constantly be checking this thing to see what's going on there. So from that, I can sort of identify how people are seeing this. Major reason why this is important, with Apple Mail on iOS, there's actually a new security feature that blocks some of this analytics. So sending emails to folks with any sort of Apple Mail client, we're actually unable to accurately tell where they've clicked on a page or even what the true open rate is, because they could be opening that email on their phone with that security feature enabled, and it's not going to report the analytics back to me to tell me when they opened that. Very nice privacy feature, especially for iPhone users. But in my case, I know that if my email is being sent to somebody with Apple Mail, then I'm not getting a true read on how many people are actually opening that. So if my open rate starts to slump and I see that a good chunk of that traffic is going to an Apple device, I know that there's a figure of folks within that particular demographic that are maybe just using that security setting, which is enabled by default with an update. That being said, you can also look at the engagement over time to get an idea of when people are opening their email. So in this case, I always look at these graphs within a 48-hour window, because anything past 48 hours and you're dealing with people that have sent you their junk email. So this is a good way to segment your lists. You can look at engagement over time and take the people that look at your email 3 to 4 weeks later and put them on a lower priority list and maybe ask some questions, try and engage with them on social media, try and engage with them via text, try and engage with them in a more personal way. Because if they're taking 3 weeks to get to your email, it's probably because you're going to a junk email and not the email that they're really actually engaging with. So I like to look at that number as well. And that'll tell me, anything within 48 hours, I can tell who's really engaging with it and staying on top of it. It'll also tell me when I should schedule my email releases. And so the value of that is I can segment based on what time people are opening their emails. If I notice that my audience is engaging better after 5 o'clock or after 6 p.m., I'm going to switch all of my email marketing for that list over to a 5 or 6 p.m. time slot so that I can get the maximum amount of people engaging with that. That'll help me nail down other figures to segment my list with. That being said, all of the analytics that we do, it goes through a CRM. So I don't really have a specific preference. You've seen that we use HubSpot, we've used MailChimp, we've used Nation Builder with nonprofits, we've used Aweber, we've used multiple services to give us this information and this feedback. And I would like to now open up the presentation to Q&A in case there's anybody that has any questions about some of the stuff I've covered, or more specifically, if they wanted to have a conversation about CRM and specific use cases to their business. This would be a good chance for anybody that's thinking about doing the email marketing but haven't jumped into it yet to bring this to a conversation, and then we can talk about which CRMs might be interesting for them to try for their business and would be more effective. So on that, I will open it up to questions. And if you have a question, just go ahead and unmute and jump right in here. I don't see any hands going up. I see Arthur there. Working from the office today, Arthur?
We did have a question from Connor, which was, do you have any recommendations for purchasing email lists?
Ooh, that gets really sticky. Connor, what kind of data are you looking for? Because where you get the email list is important as it's relevant to the industry. For instance, I might not lean too heavily on L2 data for stuff outside of the political realm.
So we do, can you hear me?
Yeah, I got you, Connor. Thanks for jumping in here.
So we do commercial real estate and trying to kind of capture some of our larger clients around Springfield, be associations, insurance agencies, medical, just a really broad scope of companies. And we've tried purchasing some, I couldn't say what we've used to purchase them, but from the sites we have used to purchase email lists, we're getting real low delivery rates and real low open rates just from the start. And
so a couple things that factor into this, Connor. For starters, domain authority is going to be really important when you're cold emailing somebody. Think of domain authority as a scoring system that allows you to get past people's spam blockers. And there's actually different forms of measurement based on the different types of email platforms. But talking from maybe the Google Workspace experience, it can be tricky to get past and to build that domain authority to get past Google's spam blockers. If you're sending emails en masse, there's also some things that you have to take into consideration when you're emailing a cold list. For starters, if it's industry specific, there might be a lot of other people in your industry targeting those people as well, especially if the firm servicing your data has sold that list to multiple people with the intention that they're going to reach out for this purpose. The other factor to take into account is a lot of these list selling services, they don't clean their data as rigorously as they should. And part of that problem comes from the standpoint that you really can't. If you're selling the data to somebody else, how are you going to reliably get the feedback from them, reporting back to you what was good and what was bad? That there's a disconnect there. So that's why, depending on the CRM that you're using, it's important to clean and cultivate your own data from that. Now, there's different ways you can do that. If you're targeting locally, you can get specific with certain ad platforms. There's actually an advertising platform that we have been partnered with since the beginning of W Strategies that allows us to take a list of contacts and then specifically target them for ads. And that's a way that will clean that list, because then we'll measure the engagement from them seeing those advertisements on their television, on their phone, on their laptop, as they're walking down the street, wherever they're seeing that advertisement. We can see who's engaged with that and know, okay, this is the portion of the list that we want to segment and target some more. Then we convert them over to a real contact by getting them to opt in to have contact with us. That's much more valuable than us reaching out via cold email. Even though the broad shoot can work, you're going to see like a less than 1% engagement in most cases, just because you can't get past the spam filter. It's difficult to personalize, especially if your information is incorrect. If I'm emailing out and I'm trying to reach you, Connor, and I include in the subject line, "Hey, Arthur, interested in new homes," you're gonna look at that and be kind of puzzled and be like, "What the heck, man? Why is this relevant to me?" And unless you really, really want what I'm offering, you're not going to pay attention to that email. You're going to think, spam. The other thing to consider is that the spam filter will pick up on different names being used as well. So there's a lot of factors to weigh there. But in specific, if you wanted help with making the deliverability of those emails higher, I would look at your domain authority. I would look at cleaning the data yourself, and I would look at collecting the opt-ins yourself. And then the other thing that you have to consider is that there are certain ethical standards for outreach when it comes to cold outreach in these lists. So you can get much higher data from the political sphere with that sort of stuff, much higher quality, but you would have to clean and segment it yourself to really get to the high value stuff. And that's sort of something that we preach at W Strategies. We actually have an analogy involving Legos. The raw data or the list that you receive, it's just a whole bunch of Legos in a pile. And I know Jonathan's going to love that I'm giving this analogy because this is his analogy, but you can sort the data and categorize it differently. And, that's just separating the piles of Lego by color, right? Then you can start to amass it, but really, it only starts to tell a story when you built it into something. When I'm holding that Millennium Falcon, that Lego Millennium Falcon in my hand, then I know, all right, all these Legos serve a specific purpose to get me here. That being said, I would be interested in taking a look at your domain authority after this call. If you're interested, shoot me an email or drop me a line. I'll make sure that my information is shared in the chat here.
So I think one of the biggest issues that we've had with it is because of what we're using to send the emails out through. It's a service called Crexy for commercial real estate. And part of our industry requirements is that we have to allow one click to opt out of any emails that we're sending out.
Yep.
And so if they've opted out from, and most of the other brokers use the same service because it's fairly easy for us to use in our industry and with the laws and regulations we have to follow. So with them also using them, it's just assuming that every single person that almost is buying the same list that we are, and most people have already opted out of this domains system. So is there other CRMs out there that offer it so that we can still have that one-click opt-out option? Is that out there available?
Yeah, and you definitely want to keep the one-click opt-out, but that opt-out should be specific to your organization and not the CRM that you're sending through. So that could pose another challenge to you there. There's definitely other tools you can use for this, and there's probably tools that'll play nicely with your existing CRM. So that would be something that that we could definitely have a conversation about. We could probably find you that API connection that plays nicely with a mass email tool to sort of automate that workflow. You don't want to obviously switch completely to a new CRM if what you're using is working for other aspects of your business. But it poses an interesting problem, and it brings up a case study that we did at W Strategies in Dallas, Texas. And Dallas is known for its hailstorms, sort of religiously, and almost to the point where roofers know they're going to be working heavily between the months of March and August. They know every year there's storms, they're going to get in their trucks, they're going to drive, they're going to knock doors. And I was working with a couple roofers in the DFW area, doing a little bit of mass marketing. We engaged with a list that we had purchased for phone numbers. And with the 10 DLC compliance changes, we were able to contact people initially, asking them if they wanted to opt out, informing them that there was storm damage in an area, and asking them if we can get on their roofs, and that was effective. From like a maybe $150 purchase, we were seeing roofers getting 10 to 12 solid leads. So that was an effective way. But what we had to do to get to the clean, actual raw data people, we had to sort of segment from a couple thousand and engage in a way that was almost inviting the conversation. And if they said no, hey, all right, no big deal, right? You have to approach that from the standpoint of somebody that's willing to engage with you is going to be 10 times better than somebody that doesn't want to engage with you, that you're reaching out to cold. And a lot of the ways that we were able to build those lists was just through running an ad on Google. So we were able to collect an opt-in based on specific targeted areas. If you have neighborhoods in mind that you're trying to get access to, one way that you could do that is to geofence and to create a nice little landing page with a hook, something that's going to get those folks' attention, and run a small ad campaign to collect those email opt-ins. A really effective way to do that is to provide some sort of value in return. So you can think about your industry experience and how that plays into what you do really well, and what your homeowners might want to see from you. Maybe create like a free guide or some sort of consultation, something that would entice people to give you their email first. And then from there, that triggers an automation to where if they've signed up via email, they're going to get this other email from you almost immediately saying, hey, thank you for contacting me. First name, last name. It's so good to hear from you. Here's your guide. And then that triggers another automation, which says, would you like to sit down and talk to me about this? Do you have any questions about this? And then that sort of engages with them in a more meaningful way where they feel like they're in control of that conversation. That is a much more effective lead gen system than just reaching out in mass without the follow-up and without the ability to really make it past those initial filters. Does that make sense? It's a great question, though. It's an excellent question. It's very technical by nature, but we can definitely jump into that outside of this meeting if you want to have an in-depth conversation.
Yeah, I'll email you this afternoon.
Yeah.
Thank you for that.
Yeah, I'd be happy to help. I would look to know like what systems you're using and then how it's deployed. And then I could show you sort of what's worked well for us, give you some case examples of like what works well. I know that that's a really hot one right now with your industry. So there's some ways to do things differently than everybody else that'll separate you in a good way.
All right, thanks so much, Ben, and thank you, Connor, for bringing that awesome question. Ben, you just brought so much knowledge to the table, and thank you so much for dispensing so much practical advice to everybody. Does anyone else have any more questions for Ben before we wrap up today?
Ben, this is Deepak. I was wondering, what kind of content, how one should sound when they are sending email, something like cold email where they're trying to say, hey, check out this website. What would be the tone of the email?
That's a great question. I think the best way to determine that, it all comes back down to that A/B testing, right? You could test different tones. Something that we do in digital advertising all the time is to test the negative versus the positive. I would argue that with your first interaction with any potential clients, prospects, email subscribers, that it should always be led on a positive note, because you want them to have a positive first impression. Now, that being said, something that's very popular as like a hook is to say things like, and you see this a lot in social media, it's like, stop doing these things, right? If you do this specific thing, stop doing these other things. Or if you're doing email marketing, avoid this and this and this. And that, I think that falls less into the category of a negative tone and more into the category of positive advice. But in your case, so what specifically is the industry that you're serving, and how are you trying to reach these folks? I'm assuming this is a cold list of emails. Is that what we're talking about here when you're asking? Yeah. Okay.
Yep. Cold list. Yeah.
And then so what is the service that you're trying to really communicate to these folks?
So basically, I have like software engineers, right, from US and outside US. So we want to provide these companies with like software engineers who are pre-vetted, like they are tested, they know their skills. Like we are kind of pre-vetting them. So this reduce their onboarding time. This reduce their they don't have to understand the whole technicality. They know that we have already tested the technicality, and also like cost effective. So much more cost effective than what we have in industry. So so that's the idea behind it.
I love that. I love that you plotted all that out. I would argue though that you would do your storytelling outside of an initial email. You would do that actually through a landing page. So even if you're connecting people to that landing page through a cold email, you don't want to get into the nitty-gritty details. You want to narrow that down, especially with any sort of cold contact. You want to narrow it down to like the 3 things that you do the best. Here's 3 things that I do the best, and then here's my complete service offering. And the reason is because beyond those 3 things, you're going to overwhelm people, and you're not going to identify with them or connect with them at a level that makes them care enough to book a meeting, right? So you almost need to engage with them with some sort of offering, especially if you're doing this cold email. I would argue that you almost need some lead magnets set up on social media, different ways that you can pull people into your products and services. And then you would also need to have all of that funnel to a landing page to where you could collect and capture their email address, right? Then for the people that your existing email list that you're trying to increase your engagement with, your conversations with them almost needs to be just informational initially to provide value. And you can let the selling happen of all of your services. You can let that happen in a landing page or a video. That way, your initial email is not, hey, I'm reaching out to sell you something. It's, hey, I'm reaching out to give you something. I'm reaching out to show you something. I'm reaching out to talk about something. I want to know more about you. That kind of conversation is going to be more meaningful in the long run. It's going to help bring that engagement up.
That makes sense. Thank you so much. It's helpful.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I dropped my email in that chat too. So if you want to talk specifically about how to build those sort of funnels and systems, I'm happy to jump on an email with you, jump on a call privately.
All right.
I'm sending the email to you. Yeah.
Got it.
Perfect.
Awesome. Thanks for the great question, Deepak. I'm sorry to interrupt. But yeah, just in the interest of everybody being able to wrap up their lunch and get back to their day and respect Ben's time. Again, thank you so much. Please email Ben if you have any additional questions. And then for anybody that missed my plug earlier, because I forgot to press record, before I bragged about W Strategies, but W Strategies is a veteran-owned, Illinois-founded creative technology firm that leverages digital tools to engage, advocate, and grow. They build tools, platforms, websites, programs, and mobile apps, and offer a variety of branding and creative strategies. Check out their website at wstrategies.co, or you could reach out directly to Ben at benjamin@wstrategies.co. And thanks again for joining us for this edition of Innovate Springfield Lunch and Learn. I hope you all have a fantastic day, and this video will be available on our YouTube channel.
Thank you, guys.
All right.
Have a great one.
Again. Take care, everybody.